Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Epikonistim. IDSF is a leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend the state of Israel. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We're in a little bit of a different location. A shout out and thank you to Martin and Julie Mendelson for allowing us to have the briefing up here in Zichron Yaakov, where we have an event later this evening. And it's a great privilege to be joined today by Dr. Harold Rode, who is sitting right next to me. Dr. Rode received his PhD in Islamic history and served as an advisor on the Islamic world at the U.S. Department of Defense. He is a distinguished senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute, and it's a great pleasure to be able to chat with you today.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much, Moshe.
So I've read a lot of your writings, and it's a great privilege to talk with you. And I know you've spent a lot of time living and learning in Iran, and you have a lot to say about the Iranian idea of honor and compromise versus the Western conception of those ideas. If you could share that with us.
Well, the worst way to understand another language and culture is using a dictionary. Because let's just take, for example, the English word compromise. When you hear it, we know what it is. It's the people sit down, one side gives a little, the other side gives a little. Maybe they don't even like each other. Maybe they've been enemies for a long time, but they need to work together. They iron it out, they shake hands, and they go on together, march on. Now, in the Middle East, that's compromise. In the Middle East, you can't do that. Because if you compromise, as we understand it, that's called, you're being shamed. So what are negotiations then? Negotiations only take place after one side wins. And then they sit down at the table and the winner dictates to the loser, how are they going to live from then on? Anybody who wants to negotiate before he has won is showing in the Middle East that he's weak. Why? Because he either doesn't have the will or the ability to win. And when Middle Easterners see that, they strike. That's why for example, if we look at the Iranians and the Americans when they negotiated for what is called the JCPOA, which is in essence the Americans giving in to Iranian demands in 2015 under the Obama administration. At the time, the Secretary of State was John Kerry, excuse me. And John Kerry didn't understand how the other side, the Iranian foreign minister, whose name is Javad Zarif, was bamboozling him. Iranians can be kind and sweet, and they know we in America, that when you look someone in the face and you say nice things, that you can't be lying. But in the Middle East, you can look someone in the face, you can tell a total lie, and they know it is, but we get bamboozled into believing that they're telling the truth. Now, what happened? At the time, John Kerry had broken his leg during the discussions, before the Americans submitting to the will of the Iranians. And the more America gave in, the more the cartoons in the Iranian newspapers, the bigger the crutches that John Kerry had because he had broken his leg or his foot, I don't remember which, it doesn't matter, the bigger the crutches became. And in the Middle East, that is a defect and it is shameful. So the more we gave in, and I must say, and I know that people won't necessarily like this, let's say that dark skin is not looked upon as a positive characteristic. The lighter your skin is, the better you are. That's what they believe in the Middle East. We don't think that. And the more we gave in, our president at the time, the more we gave in, the cartoons of him in the Iranian newspapers, his skin kept getting darker. These things are still up on the net, the cartoons. You can download them and see for yourself. Our president's skin kept getting darker and darker the more we gave in. What's the message here? And I think from that we really can, how do we sum this up? The more we give in, the more they look at us as weak. And when they see weakness, they pounce. And that, by the way, is the same problem with Israel right now and the problems it has to deal with the surrounding neighbors.
Harold, you've spent so many years in the American defense establishment, and what you're saying makes so much sense. Does the upper echelon of the Pentagon, of the State Department, do they agree with what you just said? Do they understand that?
It's a wonderful question, Moshe. Here's the problem. A lot of them got it. It didn't matter whether they were Republican or Democrat. But if they really thought about it, then they would have to change their strategy and how to get what they want done. And they weren't prepared to do that. And that is how the Iranians and a lot of the Arab regimes ran circles around the Americans. I can tell you, I once gave a lecture, we're here in Israel. I once gave a lecture in a kibbutz that I had spent some time on when I was younger. And a lady came up that was afterwards. All I did was describe Arab culture. And she said, you convinced me of what the other side wants, but even though you've convinced me, I don't accept it. Why? Because if I did, then I would have to change my view of the world, and I am not prepared to do that. That's the bottom line of the White House, definitely the State Department, and the Pentagon and other American government agencies. Here's the problem. We believe in the United States that once you learn the holy language, and that's English, and the better you speak English, the more American you are. But in the Middle East, my experience is the exact opposite. Many times, the better your English is, the more you are an enemy of the United States, of the West. Why? I'm not sure, but that's my experience. That has to do with people. That has to do with Iranians, Arabs, and Turks.
Okay, so let me ask you, here in Israel, we had an October 7th, and even prior to October 7th, we live in a neighborhood where our neighbors, unfortunately, don't want us around. Whereas in the US, they're thousands of miles away from the Middle East. When you speak to defense officials, do they think there's a real threat for US interests in US soil? Do they think another 9/11 can happen, or is it so far away? It's just not a concern, and therefore they have the luxury of that approach.
Well, your question has the answer in it, and that is when you're far away, it doesn't matter. I remember that many years ago that the State Department had appointed somebody to negotiate between different factions in Lebanon. And the whole thing fell apart. And I happened to be going up with this gentleman in an elevator at the State Department. And someone got on who they knew each other. And he said, that is the guy who got on, said to the guy who had been the negotiator in Lebanon, how do you feel about this? I mean, you worked very hard. He said, well, I tried and I failed. We have other things to do. When people have to deal with this on a daily basis, and here in Israel, that is the case, people don't have the luxury of lying to themselves about reality. And all I can say is from my experience that many of the people in the State Department don't want to know these things. And some of them even bothered to learn some of the local languages, Arabic, Turkish, and Persian. Few learn Hebrew because only you learn Hebrew, put time into it. There's only one country that speaks Hebrew. It won't help your advancement if you're a Middle East person. You might as well learn Arabic because many more countries speak it, so it's better for your advancement. They don't They learn the language, but from my experience, all I can say is they know the words very well, but words are not what it's about, it's concepts. They have very different concepts of conquest in Islam. Once you conquer a territory, it must remain Muslim forever, for example. Now, the word in Arabic that for conquest and the word in Hebrew for open the door is the same. In Hebrew, it's patach, and in Arabic, it's fatah. Now, it does mean in Arabic to open the door. Fatah al-bab, bab is a door in Arabic. I opened the door. But it has another meaning as well, to open up a territory, a land for Islam. And once it becomes Muslim, it must remain Muslim forever. I want to give one example, and I'm going to apply it to here. Spain was under Islamic rule from 712 to 1492. That's a long time ago, 1492, that the Muslims lost it. But I promise you, if you knew Arabic and you got onto the net and you put in the word Andalusia, which it means Andalus, southern Spain, which was Muslim to the very end, people are still talking about how they are going to reconquer what is properly theirs. Now, by that definition, what about Israel? And I could give you many other examples, but this is a program about Israel. What is today Israel, or Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, in whatever borders it has, it was all conquered between 637 and 638 CE or AD, whatever you prefer. And that if the whole land was conquered, by the definition, by the explanation that I just gave, that means that all of this land of what is Israel, if we wish, Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, Gaza, and all that, those because they were conquered, they are not were, but are Muslim. And that therefore means that there is absolutely no difference between Nablus, which is one of the cities in Samaria or the northern West Bank, and Tel Aviv. So the idea of a two-state solution for the Arabs is absurd. Why? Because there is no difference between Tel Aviv and Nablus, because they're both Muslim. And so if they get Nablus and they control it, let's say, as whatever form part of a two-state solution, whatever that is, it's not enough. They will simply use that to get back what they believe is rightfully theirs, which is everything, all of what is also post-1948 Israel.
Harold, let me ask you, you're talking about Arabs and Muslims. Right now, the 22 countries of the Arab League are meeting. Iran is not there because Iran is not part of that league. Iranians are not Arabs. So can you just explain the difference in mindset maybe between the Iranians and the rest of the Arab world, and what tensions that creates, and how maybe Israelis or the US should be relating differently to these different groups?
Well, if the Americans and the Israelis would wish to, or would learn how this area, the part of the world thinks, I think it would be a lot healthier. We may not like what we're learning. Let me just give you an example from both an Arab and Iranian point of view. There are two alliances here in the Middle East. One is the American government, not the American people necessarily, the American government and the Iranian government, and the Iranian government's proxies, which are Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis in Yemen, and Qatar, which is a Sunni state. All the rest are Shiite that I meant. Hamas is also a Sunni thing, but they work together against, that's one alliance, versus the other side, which is the Arab Sunni regimes and Israel. Now, this sounds absurd to the United States, to us here in the West, or to a lot of people in Israel. But if you understand it from their mentality, since America is head of the non-Muslim world, then there are only two worlds, the Muslim world and the non-Muslim world. If America is the head of the Muslim world, and its ally, therefore, is Israel, because it's also a non-Muslim country, then what the Arabs see is that America is abandoning Israel right now, not giving it weapons. Are you serious to help defend itself? And they say this is proof that the Arabs, that number one, they're giving in to everything that the Iranians do, or almost everything that the Iranians do, or trying to say, oh no, please don't do this. And then the Iranians, because of their own culture, say the Americans aren't going to do anything to us. So the Iranians simply ignore what the Americans tell them, but they're together. Now, so here you've got, again, as I was saying, these two alliances, and we can go on and on and on. And look what President Biden, during his campaign for president this time, he really humiliated the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who is the rightful ruler, or the one who's ruling, because his father is formerly the king, but his father is not well. And in the Middle East, if I humiliate you, I gotta, then you gotta get me back somehow. So what happened? Biden decided that when he decided all of a sudden he didn't want to pump oil in the United States, and so he went to Saudi Arabia, and he was trying to beg the Saudis to increase their oil supply. Now, if you care about the environment, does it really matter whether oil is produced in Saudi Arabia or in the United States? It still has the same effect on the Earth's environment. But what happened was as follows: the Saudi Crown Prince had to get Biden back. So Biden arrives in Jeddah, which is the Western Saudi Arabia. The capital, Riyadh, is in the east. And the Saudis, how do they humiliate him? Your level matters very much. The president of the United States deserves to have the head of Saudi Arabia meet him. If it's not the king because he's not well, then it should have been Mohammed bin Salman, that they politely call MBS. What happens? Instead of meeting him there, MBS sends the deputy governor of the province to greet President Biden at the airport. This was humiliation. And then, since MBS knew exactly why Biden was coming, 2 days before, he announced there will be no change in Saudi oil policy. Saudi will not increase its oil. That is humiliation of Biden. We didn't want to understand it that way, we in the West, because Americans think, oh, that's history. Something that happened 3 minutes ago doesn't matter. But in the Middle East, it does. Now, Moshe, back to your question about what's going on in this conference. The Arabs are petrified. America won't stand by its traditional Arab allies. It's allied with Iran, which is Shiite. The rest, almost all the other regimes, with the exception of Iraq, are Sunni, and they have an unending war. Just like you have to, once a country is Muslim, it's Muslim forever. The Shiites and the Sunnis, what are they fighting about? Who should run Islam? Is it the Meccan aristocracy, that's the Sunnis, it's about 88%, or should it have been Muhammad's family? Shia means faction, the faction of Muhammad's their prophet, his family. Well, this happened. He died supposedly in 631. If he died in 631, there's been a lot of water under the bridge since then. And can't you come to some compromise? Well, they don't have a compromise. That is an unending battle, Shiites versus Sunnis. Now try to put all this together, and I'm sorry, Moshe, that I didn't. I'm now going to get to your question. It's really simple. The Arabs don't trust the United States, and behind the scenes, they're petrified. What is actually going on in this conference, and I'm not there, I'm not privy to what's going on there, but they're saying one thing, and whatever they're saying in public is nothing more for public consumption. And they just don't know what to do because they want to rely on America. But America is basically working with their enemy, who is Shiite and it's Persian. And now what the Persians think Iran is Persian. That's the major language and culture of Iran. And the Persians look down on the Arabs. They call them desert rats, rat eaters, all sorts of other awful things that we can't say online. And so the Arabs are petrified of Iran, and America is allowing or enabling Iran to get the nuclear bomb. I don't care what its reasoning is, America. All I'm saying is, now, if you're an Arab and you see what America is doing, you've abandoned the Arabs, you're letting them get a nuclear weapon. What are the Arabs supposed to think? You got to feel sorry for them. And maybe I would just end this little thought here, but something that a Turkish general once told me, and this was a Turkish general who was he loved America. He said, but what we are concerned about is that the Americans will turn around and shoot themselves in the foot because we have no concept of history, whatever happened. They don't want to know about history and culture. And that is why we constantly make mistakes. It's not hard to learn these things, but you have to realize you need it to make good decisions.
Thank you again to all of our viewers who are tuning in. And because we are here on location in Zichron Yaakov, a little bit of a different spot, we don't have Dr. Harold Rhodes' name up on the screen, but this is, of course, Dr. Harold Rhodes. Harold, let me ask you a question. You're talking about the 22 countries meeting at this Arab summit and what they're concerned about. And I didn't hear you say they're worried about Gaza or the Palestinian people.
Let me answer this. In the beginning, countries I know said to the Israelis, get it done quickly. If Hamas wins, and believe me, from an Arab point of view, it's doing quite well at that because it survived. If Hamas wins, or if there is a two-state solution that the State Department and other American government agencies like to talk about, these are nothing more than terror states, which will then destroy from these 22 Arab states. They will destroy Jordan. They will destroy Iraq. They will destroy Saudi. These, there is such a thing, this will be a terrorist base, and these terrorists will go out and kill the leaders of the Arab world. And that's why they want Israel to do their job. You can't say it in public. Why? Because if they do, there are people in their countries who may try to overthrow them or kill them, and they don't want that. So they mouth how much they support the Palestinians. They don't. You want to talk about Jerusalem?
Tell me what you think about Jerusalem. What's going on in Jerusalem right now?
Okay, Jerusalem is really important. We constantly hear it is the third most holy site in Islam. I ask you, what is your third most favorite ice cream flavor? Who cares? Number one, Jerusalem has had basically very little significance in history. In Islamic history, and I can give you the Islamic sources for this. But anytime somebody else occupied it, like the Crusades, who were Christians, and the Jews, then it becomes important. If it was so important, Jerusalem was under Jordanian Muslim rule from 1948 until 1967. Well, why didn't they make Jerusalem the capital of Jordan? No, it's Amman. If it was so important. Now, here's the thing. What we would call in the West a fanatic Sunni scholar who is the intellectual godfather of an extremist form of Islam called Wahhabism. He hated Jerusalem and he hated the Jews, and he wrote in the end of the 1200s, early 1300s. He lived in Damascus when he wasn't in jail there. He said, Jerusalem was nothing more than the Judaification of Islam. And he went through Islamic history and proved it. There are only two holy cities to him, he said, Mecca and Medina. And Jerusalem is not holy. Now, the Saudis are they themselves are Wahhabis, and it therefore stands to reason that the Saudis don't care very much about Jerusalem. They can't say it in public because they don't want to get killed. But how do we know that's what they think? Bloggers in Saudi Arabia, you can see this on the net, and besides in Arabic, there are translations in English, subtitles. And what they for example, they talk about Al-Aqsa Mosque. Al-Aqsa means in Arabic the furthest mosque. Well, where is this furthest mosque? They will give you, the Saudi bloggers, they will tell you that it is in a place called Ji'rana, which is about 30 kilometers, maybe 22 miles or so from Mecca. And there were two mosques, the near mosque and the furthest one. Now, they say, they don't say they say this is the real Al-Aqsa. By what are they implying? That Jerusalem is not Al-Aqsa. They don't come out and say it isn't. They just say anybody with half the sense, and they're beautiful. The Arabic is very beautiful in how they put it together. Jerusalem, if the furthest mosque, Al-Aqsa, is about 22 miles or so from Mecca, then Jerusalem isn't Al-Aqsa. Now, therefore, so how do we know that's what they think? No blogger can get away with saying these things without government approval. That's things they don't say straightforwardly. It's very through the side. And how do you understand the culture? And what is the hidden meaning here? They're very into hidden meaning in this part of the world. And unfortunately, in the United States, even speakers of Arabic don't get the idea of they understand, some of them understand Arabic very well, but they don't get the concepts. It's like what I said before. You open an area for Islam. Well, why is Mehmed the Conqueror, the guy, the Ottoman Sultan who conquered Istanbul in 1453, Constantinople? Fatih means, in simple Arabic, it means the opener. He opened up this land for Islam. And then in Hebrew, that would be the word Putah, which means Muhammad the opener. What is he like? He opened the land for Islam. And once it's Muslim, it has to remain Muslim forever. You don't go back. So Jerusalem, by that definition, the Jordanians never made it their capital when they had the opportunity, if it was so holy. And the Arab sources say straightforwardly in the beginning where the furthest mosque is, and it is not Jerusalem, as I said. It's in what is Western Arabia today.
Dr. Harold Rode, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For joining, for enlightening myself and our audience. I'm so glad you're in Israel right now. We could have you join this briefing, and I hope you'll be able to join us again and share more about your wealth of knowledge about Islam, about what is going on in this war. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you next week, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. We'll be back with Brigadier General Amir Avivi on Monday. Until then, stay safe, stay strong,